Happy Saturday. Today is Saturday, September 5th of 2020, week 36. I introduced Jill to, I guess he's technically a comedian, but he's a lot more than that. This guy, Joe Pera. He's kind of, have I talked about him already? Cody introduced me to Joe Pera. And how do you explain Joe Pera? You just would have to go see him. I've tried to explain him to Jill as like a cross between the McKinsey brothers and Mr. Rogers and Stephen Wright. It's a dry sense of humor, but he's got a feel about him that's kind of like Mr. Rogers. I wish I could explain it better. You just have to go out there and look at his stuff. Joe Pera Talks With You, I think, is the TV series that he has. And of course, you can find it on YouTube too. Monday, I was in a training class online for the work that I do. We're learning a new tool set, and so we had a trainer come in. Oh, speaking of words and talk, we have a word of the week. The word of the week this week, I mentioned it just briefly but didn't explain it when I was talking with Cody at the park the other day. The word of the week is sus. If I understand it correctly from the way that the boys were explaining it to me, sus is short for suspect, as in that is suspect. So when something doesn't sound quite right, like that sounds fishy is what somebody might say in the, further back, they say sus. And I don't know if I probably need to get them to phrase that for me and use it in a sentence sort of thing, because my use of it is probably sus or something like that. So anyway, that's the word of the week. On Tuesday, I was talking with my friend Farley, he's the director, I think that's his title, of a gallery in town called the Fresh Gallery. On Tuesday, I was talking with him about creating some virtual tours in 360 for that, using the 360 camera here. Again, the one that I'm using these days is the Insta360 1R. Also on Tuesday, Brian ran a personal record in cross country. He got down to 23 minutes flat for a 5K. Very excited about that. The best that he'd done since then was 27. This is his first time in cross country, so his increase in his ability is going very fast. Wednesday, I got to thinking just about some old tech type stuff that we have. We've got these old iPods and cell phones and things like that, and old hard drive from my Mac Mini of 2009. This one in particular I was thinking about. These are iPods that I put a note on the back here, Christmas morning of 2011. We got the boys iPod Touches for Christmas in 2011, and that was their big gift for the year. And these were a huge deal to them back then, and now there's, it's a paperweight on my desk. So it's funny how tech changes. I got to thinking about that by Thursday's Throwback Thursday. I put a post out on Facebook I'll talk about here in just a second. Wednesday also was when we decided that we are going to go ahead with our plans to go up for a very brief trip to Minnesota, and we're going to be driving up there halfway tonight and then halfway the following. Hopefully we're going to be able to see some people that we haven't seen in quite some time. Thursday, for Throwback Thursday, I put a post on Facebook asking, I said something like, hey kids, who wants to sit down and look through 172,800 pictures in 2 hours? Obviously, that's a ridiculous thing. But that's how many pictures there are in a 2-hour movie that go by in front of you at 24 frames per second. There's 24 photographs that are actually going by. So we've all sat down in a 2-hour period and looked at 172,800 photographs all at once. We just didn't realize it. Zach says the situation in Louisiana and Arkansas is pretty rough down there. He's been down there with a tree crew doing storm work. He's very happy about the amount of money that he's going to be making. He'll probably have enough money to buy a car when he gets back after just a month down there. The work, though, is probably, it's not as hard. It's the living conditions that are, I don't know. He sounds to me like his living conditions are worse than the actual work itself. They're all living in an RV because there's no hotels open and things like that down there. It's been difficult difficult at times to find food. He did say that the Sam's Club down there was waiving memberships for everybody, so they don't have to have a membership to go into Sam's and purchase food. The whole thing, though, does remind me of Joplin in 2011. I think, was it 2011? Yeah, May of 2011. Had, of course, the huge Joplin tornado that just about... There's probably very few people watching this that don't know about that. Well, no, I take that back. If you don't live in the United States, you probably don't know about it. Just like we don't tend to know about storm damage type stuff that's in other countries. Joplin was an F5 tornado that went through, and that was just less than an hour away from us here. And I went out there the week after that with a team to help see how we could just help out with what was going on there. And that was the very first time that I had ever seen total destruction in all directions that I could look. For as far as you could see in every direction, it was just things were leveled. Houses were gone, trees were gone except for the sturdiest of trunks, and then it was just the trunk that was there. There were places where sheet metal was wrapped around trees and telephone poles. And probably the thing that was most surprising to me, since I'd seen pictures of storm damage like that before but I'd never been there, the most surprising thing to me was the smell. It was, I want to say it was late May, so it was already getting hot out, and all the people's refrigerators and things that had been blown open, all that food and whatnot was rotting in the sun. And so the smell was like a bunch of rotting food, like a landfill. Friday, I don't know how it happened, but I got to thinking about, I guess it was just because we're in a election year, I got to thinking about Ronald Reagan. I went and looked up some old interviews of him, like with Johnny Carson and others. I really see, watching those interviews, why my grandpa liked Ronald Reagan so much. Many of his mannerisms, maybe it was just a thing of that time frame. Reagan was probably 10 or 11 years older than Grandpa, so they were roughly the same age. There were just some things about Reagan that were very much reminiscent for me of my own grandfather. So I read a little bit that evening about Reagan and his history, and I remembered that he had written, or was reminded in reading about him, that he had written a letter when he found out he had Alzheimer's and he was going to have dementia and things like that. He wrote kind of a goodbye letter to the country. He was just, you know, whether you liked his politics or not, I can't imagine anybody not liking the man. He was a neat guy that was likable, and he cared a lot about the country. Last night, like I mentioned, at Fresh Gallery, they had their grand opening. It was First Friday Art Walk, and Fresh Gallery was a part of that art walk. It was also their grand opening. I went out there and took the cameras and the 360 camera and the Sony. I went out there, just got some video of the goings on and people enjoying the art and that sort of thing. They had some pretty decent sales that evening, which is good. It's good to see that see these artists that are able to make a living at what they love to do. So that brings us up here to Saturday. Like I said, it's Saturday, September 5th. Oh, the shirt I'm wearing today, you can see that right there. Hard Rock Cafe, San Diego. That is a shirt you can tell it's not very worn out, which means we haven't worn it much because it's almost 20 years ago that we bought this shirt when Jill and I were in San Diego. She was there for a business trip. This was 2001. September 5th of 2001 was just 6 days before 9/11. Jill was pregnant with Zachary, our firstborn, and we decided that since she was going on a business trip out to San Diego with her, she was working for Campbell's Soup, the company, the Campbell's company. She was working for them, and she was out there on a business trip with them. So we decided that we would make it after she was done with her week there, I would fly out there. So it was kind of like going on a little mini vacation, our last one before having children. We went out there and had a great weekend, went around Hotel del Coronado Island, went on the Old Town Trolley Tour. That's hard to say. Had a lot of fun with that, and then we flew back we were living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Louisville. I think we were in Louisville. We flew back on September 9th on a Sunday. September 10th obviously was Monday, and then September 11th was on Tuesday. Obviously, we all have our memories of where we were and what was going on at that time, especially if you live here in the United States. I do believe, yes, that was a big enough thing that most countries around the world, I'm sure, heard about it. I was working from home that day. No, actually, it was my day off. I had a weird schedule back then. I had Tuesday off, but I was also the on-call person. For some reason, they shut down our phones at work that day with all the chaos. I don't know why they did that. And so the calls, the daytime calls, ended up getting forwarded to me. So here I was trying to field all the daytime calls on a cell phone while watching the news of what was going on in New York and the Pentagon. So yeah, heavy memories there. But it kind of all puts it in perspective. A friend posted on Facebook the other day a quote from C.S. Lewis when he was asked in the late 40s, how are we to live right now in the atomic age, the age of nuclear weapons? His basic response, obviously he was far more eloquent than I can remember, but his basic response was, this is nothing new. We all know that none of us get out of this place here on Earth alive, and this is not the end of the world, even though it seems like it's the worst we've ever had. Sound familiar? I mean, people are thinking that about the unrest in our country today and in our world. I don't want to slough it off, but it isn't the first, and it won't be the last time that people are saying this is the worst it's ever been. We have adversities. We have things that we need to fight through, to overcome. When we choose to be, we're good at it. So I'm encouraged by things like that. I'm encouraged by reading back to, maybe I can find a link to that and put it in the description of this video, that quote from C.S. Lewis. It was very comforting and challenging at the same time. We all need a friend or someone to grab us by the shoulders at times and say, pull yourself together. It's like that scene in Monsters, Inc. Pull yourself together, man. That brings us up to Saturday. After I help video at a friend's wedding this afternoon, we will be hitting the road and driving halfway up to Minnesota, stopping somewhere in southern Iowa. So we're going to cut the trip in half and just relax a little bit. Enjoy that. I wish Zachary could be with us, but again, he's down south working storm crew work, doing manly stuff. Well, that wraps up week 36 of 2020. Have a nice week. We'll see you next Saturday.